Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we are very honoured to have a very special guest in the studio. His name is none other than Jimmy Hugh. He is the CEO and founder of Apex. Thank you, Jimmy, so much for your time. I just want to give you a massive show of appreciation for your time today.
Hey everyone, thanks Brad.
So just a bit of feedback, a bit of a reference point for credentials that Jimmy has. He has built internal marketing analytics for Microsoft in multi-year Microsoft technology contracts. He is also involved in the China and Asia Big Data and AI Market Advisor for the Gerson Lehrman Group and many US financial institutions. One of the most impressive things perhaps is he is regarded as one of the 30 under 30 list in the Forbes list right now, and he has extensive knowledge of engineering, having been a graduate of the Berkeley University. So once again, Jimmy, we are very honoured to have you. Thank you so much for your time. So mate, if we could get started, I have a few questions for you, obviously, and some are from some of the team I work with on Twitter. But the first one I want to ask you is about Apex. Let's get started with the basics. So what is Apex?
To put it simply, Apex is a B2C interaction and data network. So what it is, it's a way for decentralized communication and interaction between consumers and brands across the consumer lifecycle. So this is from awareness to engagement to ultimate loyalty. Now, that is one complete cycle in that if you put together, it will drive the brand and consumer ecosystem onto this platform because it will be essentially a complete solution instead of only a simple protocol.
Right. So we're talking about ecosystems and networks. Would that be fair to call Apex something like that?
Yes, it's both an ecosystem and a network. Yeah.
Okay. So just in terms of it being an ecosystem, could you talk about the relationship between the user, your service, and enterprise? How does that work?
Yes. Right, exactly. So the network itself is built on the blockchain protocol. So the protocol is in the center. Now on each side, there's the consumer and then the enterprise. Now transactions taken between consumers and enterprises and between enterprises with each other are through the protocol itself. But in order to maximize value or to really productize that value, there needs to be two applications on each side for that value to actually be realized. So on the consumer side, there's CPX Wallet, and on the enterprise side, there's Nexus, which is already an existing platform, a very mature platform that my company has built over the last 3 years.
Yes, I've noticed the Nexus platform information on your website through the white paper also. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that if that's okay later. If we want to move on to how the Apex relates to the real world. This is a really big question, I think, for you because one of the key features of NEO, and we'll talk about NEO in a moment, is the real world applications of virtual assets. So can you tell us a bit more about your plan in this respect?
Yeah, so right. So I think Apex has a very real world application here in that the premise of it is based on various problems that's plaguing the B2C ecosystem in the inefficient engagement channels as well as in the data ownership and privacy issue. Now, those are not two separate issues. They're just the same issue at different junctures. It's a broken middleman ecosystem that doesn't leave much value on the table for brands as well as consumers. So what needs to happen in order for these problems to be solved is complete decentralization using a complete consent and discovery-driven protocol that's mutually beneficial for both two sides while cutting out the middlemen. So the only people here to lose are the middlemen in the process that do not add much value, rather makes the process more opaque, a lot less cost effective, and causes problems in transparency as well as data and communication problems.
Absolutely. And what's interesting also, you referenced this before, and we spoke yesterday briefly of this, is the partnerships which I want to allude to in the platforms between your service and the user. They're very exciting, Jimmy. So we'll talk about those in a moment. Let's go and talk.
Yeah, sure.
Let's move on and talk a bit more about Nexus, though, because many people have been asking about that. So, and it's obviously your technology. Let's talk about that in terms of its functionality, not just its tech.
Right, right. So what you can understand Nexus as most accurately, it's called a customer data platform. So it's not, so some of the community as well as some people that have heard about Apex see Nexus as more of a data analytics technology, but in fact it's much more of a comprehensive suite from data ingestion, integration, analytics, as well as turning these insights into action in terms of marketing and personalization. So it's a complete data-driven marketing solution for these brands. Now there's also another module called IQ, which you guys probably have also seen.
Yes.
It's really the artificial intelligence and machine learning layer module of Nexus.
Yes, I noticed in your website and also in aspects of your white paper, it goes into detail about that AI service or that provision. So that's something I would encourage most people to go and read up on because it's an exciting aspect of your overall plan. Let's talk a bit more, I guess, about the relationship. This is where it gets exciting for me, Jimmy, because I love researching about the NEO ecosystem. Obviously, you're considering trust as part of your overall plan in the sense that you want to,
yes.
Consolidate trust on the blockchain. So what's the relationship you're planning with ontology and on-chain?
Okay. So trust is a very important part of the platform, and we take this into various phases based on the phase of our particular ecosystem. So the Apex ecosystem at different stages of growth, different protocols of trust and verification would actually be used. Now, in the most basic sense, the trust protocol is somewhat already there based on the consent protocol that the consumers give the brands. So that's a very basic tenet of the platform. But what if we need the enterprises to trust the consumers that their information is accurate and they are really who they say they are? Now, for the purpose of growing the ecosystem, the first approach that we'll use in the short run is actually off-chain data verification. So we're actually working together with Ant Financial, Alibaba's financial data arm, to provide us that identity verification as well as demographic verification data. And the API agreement we have them in place is very deep. So there's 3 layers in which we'll only use 2 of the layers. First is ID verification. So that's pretty basic. Second is demographic verification. So if they say they are who they are, but do the demographics that they list themselves as, are they accurate enough? So that's the second layer, demographic verification. Okay. Also quite important for this particular platform.
So we've got ID,
third level.
We've got ID, demographic, right. And next one.
The third one is facial verification, which I don't think we need for the purposes of this platform in the beginning, at least. But the more interesting part of this is, as the NEO ecosystem grows, as well as ontology grows, it will have more and more decentralized applications, also known as dApps.
Right.
Now, one basic feature of NEO, and one very attractive feature of NEO that contributed to us deciding to go with NEO instead of Ethereum,
yes,
is that it has a built-in identity resolution feature. Now, what that is it does not centralize any data for verification purposes. Rather, it has a protocol in which facilitates verification across the dApp ecosystem of NEO. So essentially, they have projects like the Key and Ontology.
Yes.
They're both a part of the NEO ecosystem, as well as, say, Q-Link and etc.
Right.
And they actually have their own data sets, and a big proportion of those data sets will also be consumer data sets. Now, what that built-in feature of Neo is it will have a protocol that makes it easy for cross DApp identity verification. So it's decentralized verification. And I think that's what we want to strive at for the long run. But definitely in the short run, Ant Financial API partnership does a fantastic job of doing the job already.
Jimmy, honestly, that was music to my ears hearing all of that because, firstly, just to recap, you've explained the ontology and on-chain link. My understanding from what you've said also is that you wouldn't actually probably utilize the Neo service had ontology not been part of this as a trust mechanism for the decentralized blockchain system. So that's exciting to hear, but I'm really interested to talk a bit more just on that point about Alibaba. We noticed that one of the partners you have is the Ali Cloud. Is that fair to say is one of the key partners?
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
So the Alibaba partnership is 2 layers. Now, we do not partner with their e-commerce platform in any way. We partner more on their enterprise ecosystem side. So that consists of 2 things. One is the Alibaba Cloud partnership, which is a similar partnership in place that we have with AWS.
Okay.
Now, what that partnership says is that they essentially feed us a brand and enterprise network. And in return, for the brands and enterprises that's referred through their client base, we deploy the off-chain part of the solution of Nexus on their cloud. So essentially, Nexus is deployed both on Azure, AWS, as well as Alibaba Cloud. It's a completely open, it's a completely technical platform that is infrastructure agnostic. So the good thing about that is it can foster these open relationships with various different partners. Now, I would have to say the Alibaba Cloud partnership is not nearly as strong as our partnerships with Azure and AWS. Now, regarding Alibaba, there's another partnership that we have with one of their products and platforms called DataBank. DataBank is a very similar internal platform, similar to Nexus, but it only deals with data within the Alibaba ecosystem, such as Tmall and Taobao e-commerce data, etc. So we are one of their external data ecosystem partners. So the good thing about that is we have access to over 500 million consumer ID, as well as e-commerce demographic data to enrich whatever data sets that are consented by the B2C network on Apex.
So the reality.
So that's roughly the Alibaba.
Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's kind of the summary of Alibaba.
I think it's incredible that you've firstly partnered with Ali Cloud and Alibaba. But could you just reiterate for the audience, because you're well versed in this, just how big is Alibaba in the scheme of the overall global market? Considering that you're teaming up with them, this is a significant thing.
Well, I mean, they're definitely big, but they're mostly China focused, getting a little bit into Asia. Right. And it's really more of a China partnership. Now, we don't really see things as scaling globally with them as in the case with Azure and AWS. They have much more potential. Right. As the same type of partner, I suppose. They fall into the same category.
So it sounds like obviously from having read the partnerships that you do have associations with, you are going to be global. That's your plan through those other partnerships. So can we talk about, we'll cut to the chase. Let's talk about Microsoft. Let's talk about those connections that you clearly have as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's big.
Yeah, we have a very deep history of Microsoft. You might have already noticed through the information that's out there. So me and my co-founder, we've been multi-year Microsoft contractors for internal marketing and product analytics. So we built internal analytics for Microsoft. Yes. Now, the interesting thing is, our CTO, Richard, was actually a tech lead at Microsoft way before he was a director of engineering at Alibaba. So that's another interesting connection. But the real partnerships come into play on two different levels. One is Microsoft Accelerator. So Microsoft Accelerator China is the most selective tech accelerator available in China. So basically, we've been selected out of 1,500 different companies for Microsoft Accelerator 2017.
Wow.
And there were only 15 participants. One of them was us. And the good thing about Accelerator is it's not only for startups. It has companies in various different stages, everything from early stage startup to pre-IPO companies that's Series C or Series D. So, and a lot of these companies, they're running applications that's either a potential enterprise application partner or an application partner, both different roles that's a part of the Apex ecosystem. We can access these partnerships very easily, and we are very familiar with who runs Microsoft Accelerator as well as every single member that's here in China. Now, what comes with the Microsoft Accelerator, being a Microsoft Accelerator selectee and effectively partnering with the Microsoft Accelerator group, right, is that we get millions worth of Azure cloud computing credits to develop the Azure partnership and cooperation with ChinaPex and Apex.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
And so they're incentivizing us to deploy various different brands on their cloud computing platform. At the same time, that creates a very deep partnership with Azure itself.
Yes.
Because we've already trained 10 different industry teams from Azure.
Wow.
What that means is they're going to go out and get brand customers for both Nexus and Apex. And the salespeople are going to get paid for it.
Wow.
So they get the commission on whatever becomes the off-chain part of the computation power that runs on Azure. So every customer that they get for us, they get financial incentive for that. So I don't see why they would not really push that aggressively.
Thank you, Jimmy. And just on Azure as well, let's talk about that because, and I want to make this clear for you, in the research I've done with Neo, Microsoft Azure comes up quite a lot, extensively actually, right through back into Enshare's days. You would know a lot about Coco as a technology that they've been working on. It's an off-chain, scalable technology. In terms of your role with Microsoft Azure and its capabilities and interest in blockchain, can you see a partnership specifically with Microsoft Azure as well in the future as you build into a global network?
Yeah, so Microsoft Azure China, we already have a pretty deep working relationship with. It's a very mutually beneficial relationship. What they have to offer is great, and we have a lot of common commercial interests in place. Now, globally, we're not there yet.
Right.
Because our focus first is a greater China market. Because if we nail the Chinese market, which happens to be the market that we're most familiar with first,
sure,
then this is going to be a really big platform already. Right?
And Jimmy, let's talk about that. Sorry to interrupt, but can you put into perspective the magnitude of just the Chinese market for our listeners?
So essentially what we have is 1.something billion internet users. So that would be kind of the target, kind of the more general target consumer group, but I wouldn't really like to look at it that way. I would be more interested in how many internet users fall into our target demographic that's also mentioned in the white paper.
Right.
Now that number is actually quite huge. That's already in the 50 to 100 million range.
So 50 to 100 million people in that target range already.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about China, so the very interesting thing about China, what's special about China is we paid a market research firm out of Hong Kong to do consumer surveys that fits that particular demographic. China comes up as the top score, followed by Japan and followed by Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea, I suppose. Now, U.S. and North America scores were actually quite high, but there may be a survey bias in that particular sense. Now, based on our interactions with just people in our community that fits in that demographic, every single one of them literally would say, if I was a consumer, I would definitely use something like Apex.
Right.
Because I'm going to consume anyways. I might as well establish some relationship, give some consent to brands in exchange for rewards without even using much energy, say using five to 10 minutes a day max, right?
Right.
So it's a pretty attractive value proposition for consumers as well.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, say in the North American market and in the European market, it might not work the same way because consumers engage with applications differently. In the North America and European market, consumers tend to use less applications overall and like to keep it towards centralized applications such as Facebook and WhatsApp. So whether we're going to enter North America and European markets, that could be a topic for discussion. But at the time being, we're not even looking at it right now because the Asia market is so huge.
Wow. Well, thank you for clearing that up because obviously the market, the blockchain industry is significant in Asia anyway, wouldn't you say? In comparison to the rest of the world, would you argue that Asia is leading the way?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say Asia is leading the way, but one key metric is really important, growth. Asia is leading the growth, that's for sure.
Sure, that's a good point. Jimmy, just one of the colleagues I work with through Twitter, his name is Mikhail Ons, or I call him Mike. He's asked a question for you with regard to platforms. So I want to just clarify this with you, if that's okay. Obviously, you've chosen Neo as the platform of choice to append to their blockchain. But are you considering also doing that in the future with other blockchains with similar designs?
Well, look, I think right now, the most sensible thing to think is that the most mature smart contract-based blockchains that has a big enough ecosystem are pretty much just ETH and Neo.
Right.
Now, there's a possibility that other such blockchains would actually mature in time, but that's very hard to say. Now, as for Apex itself, I've been asking myself this question as well. And I think we're definitely going to build off of the Neo ecosystem in the beginning.
Okay.
But I think a possibility in the future is not switching a blockchain, but rather once the ecosystem gets mature enough, we create our own blockchain for this particular use case. Because we're essentially talking about a blockchain for the B2C interaction in itself, that's already very huge.
Yes, it is.
Now, the thing is, we have to start with an existing scalable public blockchain at this moment in time, because right now we're focused on a very specific use case with two very productized approaches to create the consumer application as well as the enterprise application.
Sure.
Right? So it doesn't make any sense for us to do our own blockchain right now. But definitely good that you brought up that question because we've definitely considered it.
Well, you cleared up that question for me, so I really appreciate that. So Jimmy, let's talk about token structures as well. So can you tell us a bit about CPX in terms of its structure and how people can access that in the near future with KYC and the whitelist as well?
Yeah, so we haven't really made the official announcement yet. So we're making some kind of announcement on Friday of this week.
Right.
But the private pre-sale is long sold out already.
Yes,
and we had to increase that because it didn't have enough space for all the partners, all the partners that we thought would be good for the token sale as well as everything after the token sale. Right. So there's not enough room for some market making partners, not enough room for some big names, not enough rooms for other partners in marketing and PR. So we definitely had to make some room. And even when the room was made, it was kind of squeezed. Now the good thing is that didn't really affect the hard cap at all. What that means is the crowd sale will be slightly condensed,
Right.
which is better for the demand on the exchanges as well. So I don't see that necessarily. I see that as more of a positive thing than anything.
Absolutely.
Now, we'll be releasing much more information very soon about the public pre-sale as well as the crowd sale. So KYC listing is going to start.
Right.
But we have more of a strict KYC approach rather than some loose KYC approach that you just use a checkbox, like some ICOs. Yeah.
And Jimmy, can we just talk about that? Because that's a big boon for NEO overall, in that they are very serious about compliance and being compliant ready globally. Was that an attractive feature also of NEO, meaning that they're strict AMI and KYC protocol, processes in place?
Well, certainly NEO has nothing directly to do with the KYC. Okay. But what's good about NEO is that the founders and the core team are very involved in all of the initial ICO projects.
Right.
So you can be ensured that these projects are at least of some quality versus random projects.
I think you cleared that up. So just in terms of ChinaPex, let's go there. Mikhail Ons also asked me to mention this one. So what's the connection with the company ChinaPex? So Apex to ChinaPex, how does that work?
So the connection is this. ChinaPex will have all the resources from the technology side, infrastructure side, partner side, customer side to really fuel the Apex network and ecosystem, and gives it an advantage that a lot of other projects don't have. It pretty much kickstarts it right from the beginning. Now, ChinaPex has quite a history with quite a number of brands and large institutional customers, in that they also have a particular brand network within that industry. So it does not really stop at the ChinaPex client list.
Wow.
So I think it brings a lot of good things to the table. In terms of management, it will be completely centralized in terms of management from the ChinaPex core team as well as R&D teams from the beginning, just to ensure that the platform gets built out as fast as possible, and that we really treat this as a real productized. It's pretty much a product of our existing company that is going to help the existing business as well. So there's a lot of incentive for the company as well to make this Apex network a really big success.
Thank you for clearing that up. One of the things that I like about your company, Jimmy, is that you have backmapped from the real world environment. Much like many of the companies that are appending to NEO now, the premise we talked about before with the real world context. When you have things like ChinaPex, that makes the blockchain viable, would you argue, now, in the sense that this has real world functionality and potential financially for next year?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
It's not longitudinal, they just got to start to work on. It's not something that you're going to hope will eventuate, but in fact it's going to be something that already links with something existing. And that's exciting for investors, I think.
Right. And I think there's another interesting point here, in that we kind of see patterns in these token sale projects as well as these blockchain projects. So the two types of rather successful projects are one is the very bottom layer protocol level projects that has a very robust technological foundation for a various number of dApps to be built upon. So pure protocol level players like Ethereum and NEO.
Sure.
Now, on the other side, there's very productized solutions for various use cases that the consumer user or the business user can pick up and use immediately without having to understand too much about the blockchain that's beneath it.
Right.
Now, there's also projects that doesn't do either of which very well, that tend to not doing so well at the end. So that's my particular view on that. Yeah.
Yes, I think, yeah, I'm reading between the lines, Jimmy, I hear you. So let's talk about partnerships, because this is one of the big things I wanted to touch upon with you. Just let's throw out some names for a moment. We've talked about some of them already. We have Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Accelerator. We now know, thanks to you, what that's about. Oracle, we have Neo and On-Chain, we have Amazon Web Services, Alibaba Cloud, Baidu and Tencent. One of the things I really wanted to ask you about was what we call the BAT group, which you'd know about, I'm sure. And it's not the BAT token, it's Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba, and not in that order. So with that respect, we talked solely about Alibaba and the magnitude of just that company, but these companies combined, these must be exciting to you, because this is a very vast and very successful group, a list that you have presented to the world in your white paper. So how big is it, really? How big is having BAT, Alibaba, and Tencent alone?
So I would like to say these are very specific partnerships with particular departments as well as sub-branches within these companies, and not any general partnerships that we list for that purpose.
Sure.
Now, regarding the Alibaba partnership, we understand it's really just Ali Cloud,
Sure.
as well as their data bank project.
Okay.
Now, for Tencent and Baidu, it's really on the marketing API side of it. So the marketing integration side of it. So the benefit of that is Nexus and the Apex connection with Nexus, the interactions with the consumer ecosystem doesn't only take place within the Apex network or applications that come with it.
Okay.
It also can span out to the greater ecosystem with a plug that is helped to scale with Baidu as well as Tencent.
Wow.
Now, there are standard API partnerships with Baidu, but we have more of an advanced and deeper API integration with both Baidu Search as well as Display. Now, this they only give to 1 or 2% of their API partners.
Wow.
So I would say that's certainly an advantage right there.
Absolutely.
And Tencent, it's mainly their display network as well as the WeChat and QQ ecosystem.
Right.
But I would honestly just say our relationship with Tencent among all these is probably the weakest, just to put that out there. Yeah.
Okay. And just
so it's probably, yeah.
And just to recap, to facilitate what you're saying, thanks to another colleague of mine, his name is NM from Bite Size Capital on Twitter, he's sectioned them off based on your presentation into 3 categories. So you've got the infrastructure partners, the technology integration partners, and the app ecosystem. So is that essentially those categories you're talking about when we talk about these partners?
Well, yeah. So, right. So Microsoft Azure, AWS,
Yep.
and Alibaba Cloud, they all fall into the infrastructure partners list. But the infrastructure name aside, what that is they bring brands and customers onto our platform, with the infrastructure being that if these customers come on board, the off-chain part of it would work on their infrastructure. Hence, they get to monetize their infrastructure.
And Jimmy, just to ask you on that one, is that their centralized infrastructure, they have a mutually beneficial system with you in that they also get business out of it for that first point?
Right, exactly. So if say Microsoft Azure brings Ford, which is one of their customers, to use Nexus or Apex, what would happen, or our current commercial agreement in place, is that the off-chain part of that solution would be deployed on Microsoft Azure. So by getting us that customer into our network, they get to make money as well.
Wow.
So that's why their salespeople are incentivized to push our solutions, both on the Apex as well as on the Nexus side.
Thank you for making that clear. So let's talk about the next part, the technology integration component. So we've got ChinaPex, Baidu, Tencent, Oracle. There to facilitate specifically the integration, as you were talking about?
Right. They don't facilitate the integration, but
Okay.
they're good hubs to be integrated with.
Right.
So I think we talked a little bit about, Baidu and Tencent integrations,
Yes.
but the Oracle integration is quite interesting because it's the integration with Oracle Marketing Cloud and their flagship product, Eloqua.
Eloqua. Okay.
So what that is, it's a direct marketing technology that acts as a campaign manager.
Right.
And the interesting thing is we have a lot of common customers with them. So it's more of a customer sharing thing as well.
Okay.
So we have customers such as Maserati and Ferrari that's both using ChinaPex
Wow.
as well as using Oracle Marketing Cloud.
Wow.
As well as the general manager, Paul Yang, is also a very important advisor on our particular project. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds exciting. They are significant companies, like many of the ones we're talking about. So the other partnership I really wanted to ask you about, Jimmy, is the partnership you announced recently in Japan, which you'd know about, with Jonathan, the Red Pulse connection, the very exciting partnership. Let's talk about how important that is.
Now, that's a very important partnership. It's important in a way that it kind of sets a standard for a particular type of application partnership. So it's an app partnership.
Okay.
So as you might have seen from, the Apex white paper,
yes,
the app partner ecosystem is very important in scaling the entire platform.
Right.
That's no doubt. And Red Pulse would be an example in the financial information and in the finance vertical app category. Now, what's more interesting is it's also an example of what will be a decentralized application.
That's right.
Not only a decentralized application, also on the Neo ecosystem.
Yes, which is very exciting.
And the interesting thing is after that partnership was announced, there have been other DApps that directly approach me to ask partnership with Apex. So not necessarily every single one of them is suitable for the use case and for the partnership, but it's an interesting thing, yeah.
And Jimmy, would it be fair to say that some of those DApps who were applying to try and utilize your service were not related to Neo, but perhaps related with another ecosystem?
That's entirely possible. So we have various regular mobile application partners already signed up.
Okay.
So if regular mobile application partners can sign up for our ecosystem, and all we do is put the smart contract portion of the SDK into their application, and how they want to customize the user experience is up to themselves.
Right.
If it's that easy of an integration, and it can also add value to their app, and that normal mobile applications are already signing up to be partners, then I don't see why, say, if a mobile DApp that's built off of like Ethereum can't do so.
That's very interesting that you say that. So let's talk about, can you tell about whether, with regard to the roadmap of Apex, can you tell us a bit about what the plan is for, let's say, 2018-19? In terms of the cryptocurrency and blockchain world, that is a very long period of time. But you have a very clear structure.
Yeah. So the strategy is actually quite clear. So what the strategy is we build out the platform as soon as we can. So right now, Nexus is a full-blown platform that already has a variety of use cases that is easily adoptable. All we need to do is connect the Apex protocol into Nexus, which is already done on a testnet level. Okay. And a video demo will show that. That's coming out later this week, which will be something interesting.
Oh, I read between the lines there. I could see what's going on. That's exciting.
Right. So there's actually not too much development on the Nexus side because it's already a very mature application.
Wow.
Now, the mobile application is within development phase. I'm talking about CPX Wallet. That's on the consumer side.
Sure.
So we are launching the mobile application CBX wallet by Q2
Wow.
of the following year, at least in private beta mode, that some of the brands that opted in would already get to test it. Okay.
Right.
Now, in terms of strategy in onboarding the ecosystem, there's quite a number of token allocation that's already set aside for that. That's pretty clear already.
Yes.
But the strategy in the priority and in the order is we onboard the good and the best brands first, and then that will naturally draw the consumer ecosystem onto the platform.
Wow.
So that's the strategy. Instead of targeting the consumer first without a robust brand network. And in terms of a robust brand network that would be on trial or already using the Apex network, I think that's our biggest advantage already.
Absolutely. And Jimmy, would you argue that your approach, it aligns with Neo, obviously, because you're both asset driven, you're both business driven. And I only say that because I don't want to harp on, it's an interview to respect your responses, but I've really noticed that there's a difference between those who are looking for a quick buck in the market movement of an investment of hope, and those that are actually looking deep into business models of blockchain.
Exactly. So that's the great thing that I like about Neo is that so it focuses on a concept called smart economy, which sits very well with the enterprise use cases as well. So you'll see that quite a few of the Neo projects are quite data driven,
right?
Which is something that's different from the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole. Now, Ethereum has quite a few decent data projects, but in terms of pure proportion, that's something quite noticeable about Neo.
Right.
And the way that its technology was built is very enterprise friendly. I mean, the performance and as well as the DBFT mechanism that it has pretty much improves the performance quite a bit, that it could be enterprise ready and scalable. So that's quite an important part, I think. I think the founding team had that part of the strategy in mind, in that if they were to start a new blockchain, they saw business ready and enterprise ready being one of the key parts of it. And the great thing is they have various different SDKs, including C#, Java,
yes, they do.
as well as they're going to be releasing Go.
Yes.
So regarding real enterprise adoption of Ethereum, Neo has a particular advantage because most enterprises do not want to use Solidity.
That's right.
That's just a fact, yeah.
And Jimmy, I'm so glad we're talking about this because I get a lot of misunderstanding with regard to why I focused on Neo. But as you would be able to attest to this, is that there is an identical protocol design called DNA through on-chain. And that is part of that ecosystem you and I were talking about. And that is also what makes Neo so attractive, because it's not Neo the blockchain anymore. It's Neo the ecosystem.
Right. So regarding on-chain, as well as ontology, those are some interesting things that's a part of the Neo ecosystem. Now, ontology is a very important project. I think a big part of the data verification problem, ontology can solve as well as tackle.
Sure.
Now, ontology could be its own fast-growing blockchain that focuses on data verification as well as identity verification. And Neo being kind of the more transactional smart economy part of it. I think they go hand in hand together. So that's pretty exciting as well. Ontology would be beneficial to the Neo DApp ecosystem as well.
Yes.
And the interesting thing about on-chain is it provides technical support as well as consultation for any company that wants to build on top of the Neo blockchain.
Right.
So that's good in a way that there's some enterprises that would definitely have faster adoption of the Neo blockchain if there's a firm like on-chain to really support it. I mean, we work very closely with on-chain as well.
Yes.
I mean, we have a big tech team, but the on-chain people, they're very, very professional and as well as high expertise driven in the area of not just neo-blockchain, but blockchain in general.
And Jimmy, I'm actually talking with Jun Lee this Friday, so I'll mention that we've talked because he's an amazing man in his own right. And what is interesting also, Jimmy, is that there is a NeoX protocol that you would know about. You actually mentioned it before without our viewers knowing. And that's that interoperable protocol that's going to bridge on-chain and Neo, which is planned for next year. So that's a really exciting thing that's going to facilitate entry points for enterprise just in the ecosystem itself. But let's move back to Apex, which is the reason why we're talking today. I wanted to ask you a bit about one of the partners I was researching called AppDynamics. I noticed it has links to Cisco, and from there it has links to the Internet of Things.
Yeah, so just to be clear, AppDynamics is not a partner.
Oh, okay, thank you.
It's only related in the way that one of our advisors, one of our technology advisors, is a director of engineering at AppDynamics, and he manages quite a large team there.
Okay.
So his name is Wei Zhao, and he's pretty much a technology veteran, holding pretty senior roles both at AppDynamics as well as previously Box.net, the cloud storage platform.
Right.
So
thank you for bringing it up.
Right. So we have quite a few tech advisors that are not even listed on there. But I think Zhao, he definitely stands out.
Well, the reason why I asked Jimmy was because the Internet of Things is quite a buzzword at the moment. And
right. I mean, yes, and Cisco is definitely a big player. I mean, they're kind of strategically involved in the IoT space. I mean, they just bought a company called Jasper Networks, I believe.
Okay.
That is strictly a Internet of Things platform as a service provider, and they probably acquired a couple other companies, etc.
Right.
And AppDynamics itself does a lot of Internet of Things analytics, so it's an application analytics company.
Right.
Well,
thank you for making that clear.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the other backers, because when I read through some of the investors, it was clear that you had to get capital at the beginning of this venture. And I noticed that there were some interesting names that came up. We had Badwater Capital. We also had two very clever men. We had Lars and Christopher. I wanted to talk to you a bit about the request network. So let's go there. Let's just unpack the investors, because I spoke with Lars a bit today.
Yeah. So investors, we have really not even disclosed the full list.
Right. Okay.
But
wow.
in terms of investors, we tend to like to see how much skin in the game, as well as kind of the strategic side of the partnership, they're binded together with us in the long run.
Sure.
As well as their overall help to the project. So there's a couple big names that we're still finalizing deals with, but we have not really released.
Wow.
But we have various VC backers as well as private equity backers that bought into CPX. That's the funny thing. So we have VC backers for ChinaPex, but there's actually VC and private equity players that also wanted to buy into CPX as one of their first token sale deals. That's the interesting part.
Well, that speaks volumes, Jimmy, don't you think? In given that I would imagine there'll be a lot of people who wanted to invest in terms of that level.
Right. And the interesting thing is there were some customers that wanted to buy CPX for the pre-sale. And that didn't end up happening because we thought it's going to be too complex of a thing. Because if customers bought into it, technically it's going to directly have to count as revenue.
Sure.
Which is a separate stream from the actual token sale.
Okay.
So we ended up not having it, though we already had $1 million in terms of commitments from existing various different customers pieced together. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So have you found that process overall of garnering that support and getting that capital, was that difficult or was that easy?
So I think in general, I haven't really done any fundraising myself up to this point. I think it's mainly just been one of some of our early investors and advisors, such as Badwater and the 1KX guys,
Yep.
just telling some of the blockchain circle regarding, as well as the blockchain investment circle regarding our particular project.
Sure.
And the private pre-sales sold out really quickly. And we literally had commitments that were just way over whatever quota it was, and ended up being slightly a painful process of trying to squeeze it down, yeah.
Well, I think you've done very well. Jimmy, I wanted to ask you, if we take ourselves into the time of 2020, when you look back at Apex, what do you envisage?
Well,
realistically.
Okay, so realistically, we would envision an already functional platform with at least hundreds or thousands of brands on there, and possibly, I would say safely, in tens of millions of users across the world. I think this particular network can definitely scale, but it's not a network that's for everyone.
Sure.
So I think in terms of consumer network, something being like 20 million is actually already quite large, because we're talking about digital savvy consumers that's more aware of how the digital ecosystem works. So that I kind of see. And but it's really hard to say, because we're forming new partnerships every day.
Right.
In that there's large organizations, including marketing technology companies, as well as existing display advertising companies, marketing technology companies that's looking at Apex as an ecosystem, and they want to be one of the first partners that jump on board to really help scale the ecosystem, as well as to be able to say that they're connected to this blockchain ecosystem.
Yes.
So I think in terms of growth, we definitely look to scale that as fast as possible, but fast not at the expense of healthiness of the ecosystem. So the regulation part of it would be very important. At first, the regulation will be taken care of and centralized by the Apex and ChinaPex team. But as the ecosystem becomes more mature, we plan to have a community-driven platform regulation.
Jimmy, thank you for making that. That was a good answer. We like that kind of information out in the blockchain space. Mate, I wanted to ask you about just the general consensus or the understanding of blockchain in China, because you're there, I'm not. Do you think that many people understand the magnitude of blockchain in the lay space? Do you think that they're catching on?
Well, let me just tell you a funny fact. Here in Shanghai,
yep,
there's more and more people understanding what blockchain is, and it's a really fast pace. Now, there's a group now. The entire blockchain space here in Greater China, in Beijing, in Shanghai consists of two different types of people. One type is the type that likes blockchain, want to get into the space, and understands the principles of how it works, or more on the higher end, understands the technology of how blockchain and ledgers work.
Sure.
Now, there's the other part where they want to get into the circle and are very interested, but they don't understand a thing or are in the process, and that's fine.
Yep.
And that's fine. I see that as that indicates a very healthy growth rate. I mean, there's going to be some education that's required, but that's all very normal for new technology.
Right. And what about in terms of let's ask this horrible word that can be quite beneficial for every industry that we've seen evolve. Let's talk about the bubble. What are your thoughts on people who allege that we're in a bubble now?
Well, something we have to understand is certain cryptocurrency tokens are definitely in a bubble, but blockchain is not even close to being in a bubble. It's pretty much just at its infancy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm so glad you said that, because I've been saying that for months. There's a big difference. So, mate, let's just go to the last few things. Can you just talk briefly about your IQ component with the AI, and how important is AI to the next few years?
IQ is one of the main R&D focuses of the company right now.
Right.
Because IQ is, we're seeing a very huge growth in customer adoption in the last 6 months, okay? It's been 3x.
Wow.
Now, what it is it takes Nexus to the whole nother level by introducing a artificial intelligence insights layer that includes deep learning and natural language processing that basically digs out insights that the human eye cannot see. So for enterprises, if they want to get to the next level of consumer insights over their competitors, this is something that they would definitely need to have. And the good and an interesting news to share is that we just signed Maserati onto the IQ platform. They were actually a long-term customer of Nexus.
Okay.
But they basically said that we just realized that we really need this predictive AI to understand who our most valuable customers are.
Well, Jimmy, obviously you've given us a plethora of information. There's so much in what you've had to say. I wanted to thank you sincerely on behalf of the entire crypto community and the blockchain community also, because we've learned a lot. Mate, I know you're busy. You are one of the top Forbes 30 under 30, so that means you're a businessman, you're busy. Could I just ask a favor though, before we go? Could you possibly give a shout out to Mike? Mike and Bite Size Capital.
Mike and Bite Size Capital, thanks guys. Keep up the good work.
Mate, we appreciate your time, and if it's okay, hopefully we'll talk in a month or so.
Well, thank you, Brad. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, mate.